I think checking your motives and figuring out what your real goals and dreams are super important for people. I think if we can get to the heart of why we do what we do, that's really a value add. I think it doesn't matter the methodology and the logistics of how you manage your money. That's not as important, in my opinion, as the goal you're trying to reach with those resources. And so that's one of the first things that I share with people is let's get real clear about what your goal is, because the rest of this doesn't matter if you don't know what your goal is. If you don't know exactly where you're headed, what's the point in getting in the car?
This is the Personal Finance Show.
Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. Ericka Young wants you to be intentional and have a plan before you spend any money. This applies to every single situation that involves money, which is pretty much everything. As Paula Pant says at the beginning of her podcast, you can afford anything, but not everything. Unfortunately, because of loans and credit cards, we think we can afford everything. This happens to too many people. They make good money and can pay the bills, but the bank account doesn't grow and the credit cards stay at the same level. When you start out in debt, that's what you know, and it becomes normal. But living on credit creates this mindless spending, which can easily get out of control. You make decisions without thinking, and sometimes those decisions have consequences. There are so many people like Ericka who could easily break free of the mountain of debt that they're trapped under, if only they would step back and have a closer look at their financial situation and whether their spending habits align with their financial goals. One day, Ericka looked at her low bank balance and her high credit balance and asked herself, what's going on here? The process she then went through was so motivating that she knew she wanted to help others achieve the same thing. Ericka launched Tailor-Made Budgets in 2005 and has been helping people change their money habits ever since. Ericka joined me from Indianapolis, Indiana, to share her personal finance story.
Well, some of my first early memories of money management and what that looks like were both good and bad. And so to start off my story, I really need to begin to talk about some of the things that I saw that weren't so healthy. And those included being around family members who went from paycheck to paycheck. You know, my mother told me when I was young, when we had to go clothing shopping, I'd hear her say, wait till payday, or I don't have that right now, or the answer is no. And so I got some negative money messaging where I started to feel like, well, there's not enough going around. Like, how am I ever going to make it when I get older? Because I had a single parent, household. And my mother was trying to figure all of that out. And she did it verbally. And to be honest, now I appreciate that. But I think for a while, it sort of messed me up mentally. Like, oh my gosh, is money really stressful? Like, I had this anxiety about it a little bit because I knew that there was a lot of feast and famine going on in our household. But every so often, when I was little, I had a grandfather. He was around a lot, but when the holidays came, which is every so often, my granddaddy always gave me cash. Like, he dealt with cash. So some of the positive money messages I got was, one, that he had money to give, two, that he used cash, and three, like, honestly, he could be counted on. He was consistent. And he purchased a car for my mother with cash. And me being able to see that was, life-changing, because I thought, first of all, this is possible. Second of all, my grandfather must have some money, and third of all, I want to do that one day. And so that was a positive memory that I have, even though some of the upbringing, there were some messaging that had my mind sort of in a different direction. And I think it's valid for a lot of people to start to unpack some of that stuff, because not all of it is bad and not all of it is good. And it shapes who we are today if we really go back and think about what those things have done to us and what we think about money today and how that's really impacting how we utilize it, how we respect money, how we control it or not control it, or even how we go after it. Like, how important is it for us to really increase our net worth and to make something of ourselves out there in the world? And so
my past experiences and the things that I saw growing up around money have shaped the way that I kind of want to raise my kids. I don't
Yeah.
want them to think that money really is finite. I want them to see that the world, that they have so many different options and different ways to make money. I also don't want them to think that in our household that it's always no. Maybe it's not now. Maybe it's let's put it in the budget for next month or what have you, versus a flat, wait till payday type of deal. I don't want them to see or to feel or to sense that money does not happen fluently. Like, you can bring it in, you can earn something new, you can go get a job. And I tell them that all the time. I've got teenagers right now, so they need jobs.
Yeah.
And so when resources are low, there's always a new way to go find some money. And so I don't want them to feel like being cash strapped or having challenges in that area is your end result. And then I also love cash. I just, seeing my grandfather pay for a car with cash was huge in my book. And so I love knowing that there are possibilities out there for me to be able to do the same and for me to be able to purchase a car for my kids and for them to know that there's no payments on that and that kind of thing. So love being able to have those types of examples and bring it into today's life. It doesn't always have to be negative experiences that shape you. It could also be the positive ones in your past where money is concerned. And I like people to tap into both sides of it so that we can have some balance too.
So you had this contrast when you were younger. Your mom would have probably had to say no a lot, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so you don't want to pass that on. She maybe didn't have the opportunity to make more money.
Yeah, she actually was a employee. She worked for the state and she had a fixed income. And there were times when she did get a part-time job, but actually my mother did that in order to put herself through grad school. And so
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
saw work and reward right there in my household, and I knew what hard work looked like, and I admired her for that. And it's just, there were times when we were told we couldn't do something because the money wasn't there. And I think that that's a typical case for a lot of single parent families, single parent households. The resources aren't as great, obviously, but you still have the same type of overhead expenses. And so being able to see her, be successful in raising us, and we were still able to do some of the fun things, and we were still able to go on some road trips and things like that. I appreciated the sacrifices that she made in order for that to happen. But I also know that she would have preferred, of course, that there were more resources available to her. And when she needed them, she went to work. And those are the kinds of things that I share with my clients, my family, my kids, for sure, is that, when you need more resources, there's a good place to go, and it's to work.
Yeah. What about your grandfather? Do you know the source of his money? Was he also working hard when he was younger?
Yes, actually, my grandfather was a pastor for most
Okay.
of my growing up. I honestly don't remember a career before that. He passed away when I was about 17, and so I know that entire time he was a pastor, and he was able to, like I said, save money, be generous with the grandkids, as well as to his daughter-in-law, which was interesting. He was my mother's father-in-law who bought her the car. And so those types of generous moments he was able to do without a whole lot of stress and strain on his finances, which I think is amazing.
Like, you like the idea of being able to buy something for cash. Did you like the idea of being able to do something good for somebody else too in the future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if we deal with life with closed hands, we're missing out on so much. And a clenched fist is something that I really try to avoid. So I really want to open my hand, which means that more money can come in, but also be free to allow more money to go out as well. And so being able to give to great causes, being able to help other family members, being present, when situations arise, and I can help a missionary get where they need to go, or take a trip myself. My family has actually done that. We took a trip to Haiti to do
Nice.
some missionary work. And so
Yeah.
being in a position where you can be a part of that kind of thing is also a reason to not just make more money, but also be of service to other people and then be justly rewarded for that in terms of payment. I think all of that is a worthy cause. There's nothing inherently evil, wrong, or too capitalistic to make more money. I think as long as we have some balance about how we're using those resources and being responsible with it, in the end as well. I think checking your motives and figuring out what your real goals and dreams are super important for people. I think if we can get to the heart of why we do what we do, that's really a value add. I think it doesn't matter the methodology and the logistics of how you manage your money. That's not as important, in my opinion, as the goal you're trying to reach with those resources. And so that's one of the first things that I share with people is let's get real clear about what your goal is, because the rest of this doesn't matter if you don't know what your goal is. If you don't know exactly where you're headed, what's the point in getting in the car?
It's crazy how we don't start with that, right? Everyone's just like, get that job or whatever, and then you start making money, and then what? Like we don't start people out on the right foot, which should be, what are your eventual goals with money? What are your values? What would you like to do? It's not just about, like, let's start amassing as much as we possibly can.
Right, exactly. Well, and I'm in the season of life too where part of my goal is to help my kids start off on a better foot than I did.
Yeah.
My story starts off with a whole bunch of student loan debt when my husband and I, connected, and I don't want my kids to have to deal with that. And so, what are we doing, not just financially? So, this isn't just a financial legacy, but what am I teaching them so that they make good financial choices while they're in college, in addition to teaching them how to exit college and be a responsible financial human being? And so, that is where I'm headed. I have a high school sophomore now, and then I'm going to have a college sophomore as well. And that's the season of showing them what it looks like to live on your own and how you manage your money and things like that. And so when my youngest is talking about I don't have any money, I'm like, okay, well, this is a good time to go to work.
Yeah.
And she's got opportunities, but she has to follow through. And I'm not going to follow through for her. She has to take those initiatives. She has to be able to feel the pinch of not having what she wants so that she can actually get up and do something about it. Those are the kind of lessons I'd rather her learn under my roof than to find out later when she's out of work or she hasn't found a job or what have you, and she's got debt to pay. So we're really working hard to not only teach them financial responsibility, but also put them in a position where when they come out of college, they don't have student loan debt just as we did.
That's so great. I mean, I kind of wish everybody had a personal finance expert as parents.
I know, huh?
Right? It would make things a lot better. Or if we could just like, hey, can you take care of that part of my kid's life, which is what we're trying to get people to do, right? And
Right.
Hopefully it's becoming more of a thing to be like, okay, so you want to figure out what you want to do. I'm not really well equipped. I'm a doctor or whatever, right? Whatever it is I do every day. But, Ericka and Bo, and listen to all these podcasts and read all these blogs,
Right.
and then come back to me and tell me what you've figured out. I like that
Right.
that might be the future. And, for those who aren't as lucky as your kids, maybe that's what is going to be happening.
Well, hopefully it is. The funny thing though is my kids don't think they're super lucky. Like they I think I definitely believe I'm raising an entrepreneur. So one of them will certainly go into entrepreneurship, but the other one wants to be far from numbers. Now she will respect money matters and she's doing a good job of handling her own money right now, but I don't think they're going to follow in my footsteps. They are sick of hearing about a budget. They they understand the whole money thing, and sometimes they're like, "Okay, this is where mom comes in." You know what I mean? Like they get it. My kids knew the difference between debit and debt at the age of 3 and 4 and all of that. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse for them to have a money mom versus just a mom who's out, doing something different with her career, because they kind of try and finish my sentence or stop the conversation because they know what I'm going to say.
Well, it's no different from having other kinds of professionals as parents.
That's true.
Parents were both in the dental industry, so you can imagine I heard about my teeth a lot.
That's right.
I'm sure everybody has something about whatever their parents do that's just like, enough, right?
Yep.
So when you're kids anyway, right?
That's right.
Now
That's
I'm
right.
glad I got braces and I took care of my teeth. I'm really happy about that.
There you go.
But at the time I was like, oh no, why can't I just have terrible teeth? So
Right.
why do I have to have braces in high school?
Right.
So
Yep, that's
even
true.
though it was the best way, it was the best thing, right? Okay, I want to get back to definitely your how you got the student debt and how you're making sure your kids are not getting into it. But we gotta go back to your learning about money. So you got these general views from watching people, and then when did you actually start making some money of your own? Did you have to start early to help out with expenses in the house, or was your mom able to take care of that?
Yeah, she was able to take care of that. However, when I wanted a vehicle or needed a vehicle, that first
Mm,
car died pretty quickly. And I needed another car, and she couldn't help me with that financially. And
sure.
thank God I had a summer internship where I was able to get a vehicle, but I had to take on those payments. Like, I don't think that was a smart thing for me to do. My mother let me do it. She allowed it to occur,
But
but
how old are you?
oh man, I was like 18, 19,
Okay,
and I had a
yeah.
car payment.
Just
Um,
finishing high school then.
I was 1 or 2 years removed from high school.
Okay.
Um, and it was a summer internship that I had, and I did have a job, in college. I was a resident advisor, and then I was a resident director. And so by the time I was a senior or in my last year of college, I did have, money coming in where I can take care of things. But still, that's a big thing to have a car payment while going through college. And I'm
Yeah.
certain I had that car payment for a good 3 years.
And it was all student loans for your school
Yeah, it was a
from the
lot of student
beginning.
loans. It was a lot of student loans. By the time when my husband and I added it up between the two of us, when we finally got married right after college, it was very shortly after I graduated college, we got married, and we added up our student loan debt, and it was approaching $45,000 together. Plus, we had two car notes, my car note, his car note, and between us, 7 credit cards.
Just stepping back just for a sec,
Yeah.
was there ever any thought of saving for school? Any talk about that in high school, or were you able to make like any money in high school working? Any of that stuff?
Sure, yeah. So I did have summer jobs. I didn't typically work during high school while I was in classes. I had other things I was doing. I was a cheerleader and chasing boys and all of that.
Yeah,
Um,
being a teenager, yeah.
exactly. But there wasn't talk about, like, my mother couldn't save for college. My grandfather saved some money for us, which was great. But my mother and father were not able to save for college. They periodically would give me money while I was there just for food and things like that, and bought my books and the simple things like that, but they were not able to contribute in a large financial way. My grandfather did contribute several $1,000s towards my college tuition. And then I also, one of the biggest things that my mother said was just start looking for some scholarships. And so I did the in-state
Yeah.
college route. I did scholarships. So my first year was largely paid for. And then
Okay.
after that is when I really had to, one, maintain some of those scholarships that I had, and then two, find other ways, which was a lot of student loan debt, to make the rest of it work. And so I was a 5-year college student. And so I was in engineering. I did the College of Engineering at University of Michigan. Thankfully, it was,
Nice.
in-state tuition, because nowadays my youngest daughter wants to look at University of Michigan, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's out-of-state tuition. That's crazy.
Uh,
But yeah, some of that onus was on me to go look for some scholarships and do some programs that would help cover some of my expenses and some work study. So I worked all through college in some type of way. So I may not have done that in high school, but I definitely did that in college, and was able to reduce my expenses a little bit. But when I got that car, that was problematic. Like, I made the payment, I never had any issues with that, but it forced me to grow up and be responsible. So I had to work, and sometimes that's good and sometimes it isn't. I mean, it definitely can affect your grades. It can affect your ability to do some things, and so I was real serious about making certain that I had internships and some form of income coming in. I think it's a catch-22. I think it also depends on the child, on the student, because I'm almost certain my grades would have been better if I didn't have to work. But I also find that if you don't have any real life work experience, it can be a little devastating when you have to work a 40-hour work week once you come out of school, and you're not really certain how this works. I mean, it can be challenging for a lot of people to make that transition. So I didn't have a real problem with that, but I also didn't have a 4.0 GPA.
Well, yeah, I mean, how can we balance all this? I mean, you're absolutely right, and I was talking about this with Robert Farrington as well.
Yeah, the college guy.
Yeah, he talks about this all the time. Is that, yeah, like if you don't have any experience in high school or university working, sorry, I say university, I'm Canadian.
Sure. Yep.
Then you're going to be in for a bit of a rude awakening when it comes to figuring out how to work. It's just a completely different thing, right? They don't really teach us how to do that. You have to experience like a 9 to 5 to know what it's like, and do it consistently, and not just like, on a Saturday every so often. So,
Sure.
yeah, the reason I wanted to step back for that was because I wanted to just understand that you knew you would have to rely on student loans. There was really, and scholarships. There was no real other option for you.
Absolutely. I knew that, and honestly, I was okay with it. I mean,
Okay, that was
there
normal.
wasn't talk of anything different.
That was the thing
So
to
the
do.
truth of the matter is that I wasn't blindsided. I think where sometimes parents tend to go wrong is they make their kids think, oh, we're going to take care of everything. And then when they see the cost of college, or when they understand, because the cost of college is astronomical. I mean, it's very different from even when I went to school. They have this whole idea that I'm going to be able to make it happen, or they let their kids believe that even if they don't believe it. And then the kids start signing for student loans because that's just what they think they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it gets really outrageous. Nowadays, I'm seeing people, it is very common for my clients or people to come in who are needing some help with their finances to have $100,000 in student loan debt.
It's unbelievable.
It is.
And they're not even making $100,000.
No, nowhere close.
For maybe it could be a decade before you even, depending on your industry, you
That's
may
right.
never make $100,000.
That's right.
So like, how can you have? I always like to think that you should never. Well, you should never have a lot of debt, of course, if you can avoid it. But like, it's almost unmanageable if your debt is more than you could even make gross in a year.
That's right.
That-
It
oh,
is. It's devastating. And to be clear, most people come out of school nowadays with, you can easily say $35,000 in student loan debt, and that's just undergrad. We're not even talking about grad school.
yeah.
And then depending on your, like you said, your industry, what are you actually going to, where are you going to go where you can make enough to be able to be real successful in paying that off aggressively, especially if they haven't set up the other foundations. Like, you need a car, you need a place to live, you got to put clothes on to, for said job, establish yourself. I mean, the interesting part of the story that I typically don't hear from parents is how they help their kids set up their life. Because
Yeah.
that's costly to furnish an apartment, or hopefully, if they're moving across this, moving across the country or going somewhere different, how do they help them with that? Typically, that's not something that's discussed. They're like, "Oh, you're done with college. Like, I finished helping you get there, and I'm done. Here, I'm done."
You're on your own now.
Yeah, and
we don't have skills for that.
right. That whole transition can be challenging, and it was for me. Definitely. Like, yeah, we were married, but My husband didn't have a job for a couple months. I didn't get paid for a good month when I started my job.
And your student loans, so you both have had about 20 something then in student
Plus.
debt, is that right?
Yes. Yep.
That must have ballooned then while you were waiting to pay it off?
Actually, so no, we had the flat 10-year plan to
Okay.
be able to pay it off. We had some private loans. There was less than $5,000 in private loans. And then we consolidated our student loans together, which sometimes is good and sometimes isn't good for people. For us, it worked out where we consolidated our loans until we had about $42,000 in student loans consolidated, and we had one payment for 10 years. And so it was supposed to be $451.21 every month for 10 years.
Okay, wow.
I have it down to the penny. I will not forget that number.
Your life is planned out for, it's like getting a mortgage, I guess.
It is. I mean, and that's more than a lot of car notes right now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And that was tough. I mean, it was the thing that was hard to pay when my husband lost his job or when I was out on maternity leave. It was like, oh, this stupid student loan, you
So
know?
it was always there. It's just, did you always make it a priority to pay that?
Yeah, we had to. When my husband lost his job, he was out of work for a good 2 months. And during that season, if I'm not mistaken, we were about a year away from being able to pay off all of our student loan debt. So we weren't being aggressive at that point, of course, paying down on it, but we just paid the minimum and tried to keep it moving. Of course, if it had gone too much longer, I think we would have had to defer it. You slow down a little bit on some stuff when life hits you a curveball, but
Oh, yeah.
and for some, doing a deferment or a forbearance is totally reasonable. We didn't get to that point because he wasn't out of work for that long. But you get to those places where you're like, can I afford to pay this bill? That's the question of the day.
So the student loan didn't grow. A lot of people, like you said, with the forbearance or the deferment, some people's loans will double, which is
Right.
ridiculous to me. But that's another story.
Right. Yeah.
But you were amassing other debt as well.
Most of the debt that we amassed was in car debt. So when I paid off that first
Okay,
car I
yeah.
just talked about, we got another one,
Yeah.
of course, right?
Okay.
We had, a little one early on in our marriage. We were a year and a half into our marriage and we had a baby. And then 4 years later, we had another one. And so with each child, we were like, oh, we need a car. We need something safe, reliable. And that's the whole thing that we always say is, we need a safe, reliable car for this baby. And I'm like, a safe, reliable car does not have to be $20,000,
Yeah.
And so hindsight is certainly 2020, right? And so we did replace a vehicle. When I was on maternity leave with my first child, early on, I mean, the car died. I mean, the car literally died, and it was only, think about this. Looking back, it was I'm saying only $1,000, but at the time we didn't have $1,000 to get the new engine in the vehicle. So
Okay.
we went for 2 months without that vehicle and carpooled and did what we needed to do. It was hard, but we did it. And what do people do when they don't have money to resurrect a vehicle? They go get a car note. And that's exactly what we did. We were like, okay, well, we can't do this much longer. I got to get back to work. We got a car note.
Yeah. And so you mentioned, did you say 7 credit cards?
Yeah, we had 7 credit cards.
Like, what are you doing with all this credit, and at what point did all of it come in?
Oh, most of that credit was accumulated in college, believe it or not. So we were
Yeah.
those
Oh, okay.
we were the suckers who got the t-shirt and got the free pizza on college campus
Of
and
course.
said, yes, I'll sign up for this. Sure, I want this card. And so frankly, I mean, I only had like 3 myself and my husband probably had 4, and it wasn't like they were $5,000 balances. They were,
No.
500 here, 300 here. But it all adds up. I mean,
Yeah.
and then you have payments on 7 cards. When we realized it, when we woke up, we were like, this is nuts. It just made no sense. It was almost where it was just fun in college to use someone else's money and I'll deal with that later. That was
Yeah.
the mentality.
That's what we're taught, right?
Yeah.
Which is really, it's just so backwards. I mean, for what you're teaching people now, of course.
Right.
What
Yeah.
like what was the what was the lowest point, would you say, in terms of the carrying debt? And I imagine that was probably a catalyst to start turning it around.
Actually, the lowest point, there were a couple low points. but but
That makes sense.
yeah, one of them, and it's a small thing, but it was impactful and I won't ever forget it, was, I was working as an engineer at Motorola,
Oh
and
wow.
typically, engineers make decent money, but I wasn't able to use my debit card or my regular checking account to pay for lunch out with my team. And
Wow.
I had to use a credit card repeatedly, and I was hiding that from my husband. So it might be small to spend $10 here and $10 there, but the fact that I couldn't share it with them was shameful. And the fact that I didn't feel comfortable saying no to my coworkers because I couldn't afford necessarily to go out with them. So I just hid it all by saying, forget it, I can do this. And I put it on a credit card. My husband is the one who took the credit card away from me when we had a heart to heart about that. He's like, why is this balance not going down? And I can laugh today, but I felt like the dog with the tail between their legs, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Over $10 here, $10. I didn't think it was a huge deal.
What was the actual reason for all of the debt? Was it just not paying attention?
It was. It
Okay.
but it was also, when you think about how money flows in and out, it was a real cash flow issue.
Okay.
So it seems easy enough to pay a bill at that time, to write a check or to make a call or to send in payment online or whatever. That part's easy. The hard part is to add it up and see how much have I spent? Like, what are all of my expenses and all of that? And so if you think
Yeah.
about it, we had this student loan debt, we had 2 card notes, and we had 7 credit cards. Our total amount out per month for debt alone was over $1,000,
Yeah.
just on minimum payments.
Minimum payments. Wow.
Exactly. And we didn't have the wherewithal to understand, like, when you get paid on this day, you still need to have groceries. You know what I mean? Like, other parts
Yeah.
of your life need to still be able to happen. And so the confusion started when my husband was like, why don't we have any money in the account?
Yeah.
And that was like the beginning conversations of what's really going on here. The bills are getting paid, so we didn't feel that crunch, but why don't we have any money in the account? And so we started having these conversations, and then he started looking at the credit card statements, and he started, doing some investigating, and then he was listening to Dave Ramsey on the radio, and so it just began to, I don't want to say unravel as much as blossom into an awareness of our financial situation. And we both came from single parent households, and neither one of us wanted to live feast or famine, but we saw ourselves going down that path. And so the only way for us to really get some wholeness is to be honest and then lay it all out on the table. So that's what we did. And we just said, okay, here's the moment. We've got to figure this out. And then we added up all of our expenses, and we realized that we can't blindly pay bills or live life. We have to be intentional and have a plan before we spend any money. And that in and of itself was life changing. And so that's what led to me being willing to give up the credit card and us deciding, okay, that's not a priority. And also just saying how much is reasonable for dining out with coworkers. Um, how are we going to make this happen if it's important? And if it's not, it's okay. How are we going to handle those types of situations? Both of us carpooled several times. My husband actually took on a second job during some of that season, and he actually got his master's degree later on in that process. We went through a lot of different steps in order for us to not only get free of the debt, which it took us, like, our total debt became about $90,000. So between our credit cards, the car notes, the student loans, all of that, the debt
Yeah.
amount that we paid off was over $90,000, and it took us about 5 years to do that. Um, there was 1 year of awakening in that. and then the rest was, let's be intentional. And so we clearly had enough money to make it happen. We just weren't maximizing on it.
Isn't that crazy? Like, because a lot of the stories you hear are about maybe even both of the spouses are doctors, right? and
Right.
they're both
Right.
making killer money, but
Yeah.
somehow they don't have any money in the bank. That sounds similar to your situation, not as bad as the ones that I've heard with like millions of. Oh, there was one Dave Ramsey, the one that's got the millions of views on YouTube,
Right. Right.
where they both call in and is like, "We have $1 million in credit card debt." I think.
Who in the world loans that kind of money to somebody? That's
Well,
crazy.
that's the whole other podcast episode in itself. But there's a
Yeah.
Dave Ramsey method of figuring all this out. Did you
Yes.
go there?
We did. We did. Actually, yeah, my husband is actually the one who found Dave Ramsey. And then we decided to go to one of the live events when we lived in Arizona. And about 3 months later, we said, okay, enough is enough. It was in that process where we realized we couldn't fix our car.
Yeah.
And that
Oh,
was sort of the line in the
yeah.
sand. We said, oh, we cannot
Sure.
allow this to happen again, where we get another car note and all of that. And so we just said, okay, let's do this. And so we took his class and tried to get all our friends to do it. And that's when our journey started to actually getting out of debt. Prior to that, we were just coasting. That's the honest truth. Prior to that, we were just coasting, living, doing what we thought we needed to do. But after that is when we got really focused and said, extra money needs to go towards paying down debt. And we started off with like $66,000 per year in income. I mean, we didn't have an exorbitant amount coming in. But as those, over time, as we got raises or bonuses or squeezing the budget sometimes and just saying this month, let's just pay this thing off, we started to be intentional. And I think that's the big difference is to know where you want to go and to make certain that no thing is going to get in the way of you getting there.
Yeah, because
And
you could have just, you would have got your raises and bonuses, and it might have just gone to other stuff or more
right.
minimum payments. It's funny how we think, oh, when I make more money, but it isn't that simple, is it?
That's right. That's right. A lot of times when people make more money, they spend more money.
That's right.
And people find it super easy to make payments. And now it's super cool. It's the end thing is just, it's not necessarily credit cards, but it's everything on payments. It's buying, a lawnmower on payments. You know what I mean?
Really? Is this trendy now? This is the trend?
It's easy, right?
Oh,
It's
it's easy, yeah.
easy. So for years, people have been sort of rent to own their furniture and things like that, but they make it easy for you to buy a mattress, for instance, or like I said, some furniture or some equipment for your lawn or what have you, or a furnace or new windows. I mean, you can get all of this on payments and never touch a credit card and never have to refinance your house.
You don't even have to qualify for, like, they basically, will they just
Yeah.
approve anybody, a lot of these places?
Well, it's a little easier to get approved,
Yeah.
especially if it's a home improvement type of thing. And so,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
because there's this home, right? I mean, there's a mortgage or there's value there, or there's an appreciating asset. And so, it's really easy, especially if you've got great income. Sometimes just having a good income will allow you to get approved for some things. And so, because a lot of people can rent or lease a home on a great income and poor credit.
They just want to know they're going to get their payments, right?
That's right.
So
That's right.
that's what a lot of them will look at. I mean,
That's
that's how payday loans work, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's a slippery slope, though, right? When
It
you
is.
get it, I mean, you had all of these payments. What if both of you? What if you lost your income at that point? Have you ever considered what might have happened if, like, at
Well,
the peak of this, you would have lost
yeah.
the ability to earn money?
Right. Yeah. Like that's interesting that you even say that because at first I knew I wanted to keep working, but I knew that I didn't want to keep doing that job for
Oh,
10
yeah, okay.
years or for a long time. And so there was this season of change, especially when I had my second child, where I was like, ooh, I don't know that I want to be away or not at home for all of these lengths of time. So I toyed with the idea of coming home and taking like the voluntary severance from my company. But we had debt. There was that season where my husband lost his job. And
Yeah.
thankfully, we had a little bit in savings. And by that, I do mean a little bit. We had something there, but his layoff period was short. And so we didn't necessarily have to do too much finagling in order to get through that season. We considered it. I'm glad that we didn't have major issues where he was out of work for 6 months, or I was out of work for a while because I was the breadwinner for a while.
Yeah.
It didn't those tables didn't change for like 5 or 6 years. I could not step away from my job, and if I lost my job, it might have been a different story in terms of how we handled that. I think a lot of people need to also understand that they have to have money in savings in order to weather some of these storms, and you can't rely on credit cards for those emergency situations because at some point you're going to have to pay it back, and you're not certain. I meet a lot of people who use credit cards in the interim and they're a little too free with it. They use it and they haven't decided to cut back on dining out. And
Yeah, isn't that funny? Like
yeah,
you don't get to maintain your lifestyle if you don't
no,
have. I mean, like, okay, I'll use my personal example as an exception. I saved up a lot of money to live for these couple of years that after I quit my 9 to 5 job. I worked hard and I saved half of my income basically for years so that I could do that.
yep,
That's an exception. If you don't
sure,
have any of those savings, then you
yep,
can't maintain that lifestyle. That's what's supposed to kick you into gear, right? That's
yep.
the kick in the pants that you need. So if credit is removing that kick in the pants, well, how do we get out of it?
That's right. That's right. And I think what I like to say to people is we have to create some healthy boundaries around yourself. So a lot of
Mm.
people make great money. I don't typically deal with or even get a lot of calls from people who are destitute. And by that, I mean living on $15,000. You know what I mean? Like there's not
Yeah.
those extreme lows in income. I work with a lot of people who are making 100 grand or more on average, and they just haven't done a good job of managing their money. And so they need healthy boundaries. It's really not about saying no to everything because I hate
Mm.
deprivation. It's really about how much and how often. And so don't say no entirely to dining out. Like that isn't realistic for most people. People say, "Oh, I never dine out. I never dine out." And then when we look at their spending for 30 days, they've spent $100 at least, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, so the reality is you are doing some dining out, even if it's just takeout pizza or, Chinese, whatever it
Yeah.
is, it doesn't matter. It's still money going out. And if we're not intentional about that $100,
They don't even
yeah,
realize it's happening. So what else is
yeah.
not happening, right? What
Mhm.
else are they not noticing?
A lot of times people don't notice that they still have subscriptions coming out automatically on their
Yeah.
account. They aren't paying attention to the fact that their insurance has gone up over time or their cable bill. And these are some of these things are things that you can look at on an annual basis to see if you can reduce. They're not realizing that their kids have things in their closet with the tag on it that they've never worn, but yet they're still getting new clothing. They're not paying attention to the things that fall through the cracks, the money that falls through the cracks, and the things that they're not using or paying attention to, those add up. Fees, for instance, fees are one thing that adds up for a lot of people. I actually had one person years ago that I had her add up how much in fees she was spending, and I'm not just talking about overdraft fees. I'm talking about just getting money from the wrong ATM.
Yeah, like $3 or what? Yeah, here and there.
Yeah, right. And so when you look at that and it adds up to $100 a month or $200 a month, you're like,
Wow.
come on. People will come to me and say, I had a couple of overdrafts. I'm like, okay, so let's add up how much that is. And this is a person making, I had a couple making $200,000 per year. And when they called me, their account was overdrawn by $600. It's simply not paying attention. It's
Yeah.
simply not saying no. It's simply avoiding the delayed gratification. And I get that it isn't comfortable all the time, but if you want to get control of this, we have to learn what to say yes to and when and how much in order to gain control over it.
I try to be sympathetic to a lot of financial issues, especially because I went through bankruptcy myself when I was going
Sure.
through my addiction. Overdraft is still one that I don't understand what it means to me, especially if it's in your bank account in a checking account. I don't know. You should know what's in your checking account,
Hmm.
or if there's something that's coming out of it, you should know what's coming.
I think the challenge is that people, their lives have gotten so busy
Yeah.
and they've allowed their finances to get so much more complicated that everything is coming out automatically and they see money in the account and then they feel like they can use it, but it's for a bill. And so,
Yeah. Well, how do we have these two parts of our brain, right? Like we know the
yeah,
bill is coming. We set it up to come out of the account. Then we look at it and we're like, I can spend that. You can't have it both ways.
yeah. See, the problem is that they're not binding the pieces together and
Yeah, that's it.
realizing that this amount of money is untouchable. And so that's where I get into creating cash flow plans for people, because a budget is one thing, and I love budgets. That's the name of my business, Tailor Made Budgets. However, a cash flow plan is how you do life
Yeah.
and how your money comes in and how you spend, so that you know, again, what those healthy boundaries are for your spending. And so I know I've got $100 in dining out and I just spent 50. So I'm not spending more than 50, right? Because if I overspend there, it's going to take from something else. And so I know what that healthy boundary is. And people aren't aware that at some point either the spending has to stop or they have to be intentional. And this is where creating a meal plan, especially for families, looking for coupons, looking at how much your grocery bill is. Honestly, one of the things that saved not only my bank account but my waistline is is not getting so much of the cookies and the desserts and all of those extra things when I go grocery shopping, or sugary drinks and things like that, those extra things that aren't quite necessary, not necessarily for nutrients. I don't buy them as much, because, or I didn't buy them as much when my kids were growing up, because those were easy things to eliminate and still be able to feed my family. And then when we wanted cookies, we made them. So then it becomes a project and it's this whole family moment, right? Versus it being, sure, I'm going to spend $5 on these cookies and blah, blah, blah. It really became when we wanted or needed it. And then it was a little bit more special too.
And it tastes better
It
if you
does.
make it yourself. I learned how to bake pies when I was in university because I really like pie, right?
Hmm.
If
Yep.
you find a good pie now, it could cost you $20. It could
Yes,
cost, right, for a decent, like one that
that's
would
right.
taste the one I make at home. So
That's right.
I save myself like thousands of dollars
That's
in,
right.
in pie, and it seems so simple, but you can apply this to so many things.
And it's also about slowing down. What I tell people a lot is just slow down
Yeah,
enough
just slow
to
down.
to think, because I think we're so much on autopilot,
Oh
and
yeah.
especially the busy families with little kids and going, or even, high school kids, and they've got all these activities and all this. It really is okay to slow down. I gave my kids permission to take a season off of a sport or an activity so that they can slow down. My daughter took a season off of she did color guard or winter guard, both of them, and she took a season off and she got a job. And she was very excited about being able to go and do an exchange program while in high school, and she wanted spending money. And so she made her choice and she took her spending money. That is healthy. It's a good life lesson. It's a great way for her to gain some personal responsibility. And we reevaluated. Did it make sense for her? To do both, or what made sense here? And it didn't. I mean, that was a $500 thing that we would have had to pay for. Her
Mm.
going doing color guard versus her getting a job, and then that money going towards her doing a study abroad. It was a much bigger value add, and it's part of her goals. I'd rather that money go to somewhere that she's much more excited about. Slowing down to take a deep breath. We had a season when we moved to Indianapolis where I told both of my kids, I'm like, I want you to get involved, but it's really okay if we take this first semester, and do nothing, and just get to know people. And that happened, and it felt good. And so we weren't so overly scheduled that we couldn't do something on the fly, because once the kids get involved in all these activities, your time is limited. And so these are the things I think people are uncomfortable, or they feel like there's a lot of parental peer pressure out there, and it causes them to spend money not necessarily flippantly or without good cause, but you have to really see, does this line up with where we're headed? And is this really what we want to be doing? And let me talk to my kids and see what's most important to them.
I love that. Yeah, I love the idea of applying the intentionality to everything.
Yeah.
Right? Like everything we do, like financially, but everything else too. Your example of let's take the time to experience this new place that we're in. It's so much more valuable, right? Because then, like you said, you just get in there and you're just buzzing around like a bee. And do you even remember like any of it? Are you actually like, what do you want out of life is really the question, right? What are your goals? What are your values?
Right. And I almost made the mistake that a lot of parents make. I was headed down that path, to be honest, because when we moved here, I thought at first, like, you get involved and you make friends.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
I signed my daughter up. She's not really a sports type person. I signed her up, to be on the wait list for volleyball. I was like, oh, this is a sport she's never done before. Maybe she'll like it. And then when they called us and said, oh, we have a spot for her, she literally looked at me and was like, Mom, please don't make me do this. I do not want to do this. I do not want to do this. And I was like, come on, you'll make friends. It'll be fun. You'll do something new. And I was kind of pushing her because I'm like, you got to do something extra. You got to do something active. You got to do, and she was like, Mom, I really don't want to do this. And she pleaded with me and I listened. I mean, it was hard because I thought, well, this is kind of going against what I thought you would need is to meet people. She was like, I promise I'll find something. And then I said, well, we'll take it easy. How about we'll just, all of us just take it easy and none of us really get involved and we'll just see how this goes. And by November, she had found Winter Guard and she loves it. She did it for 6 years.
Okay.
And
wow.
and so she found her moment and it took 5 months between June and November, and it took some patience and some reevaluating for Mom, but she found what she wanted to do. And even at that, she took a season off in her high school career. And so there's something about us moving so quickly that sometimes we can miss some of those important moments that might make a real big difference in our kids' life and in our life. One of the things that we do, we prefer to spend money on, travel. I would rather spend my money on travel than on a brand new car. So we get used cars.
Same here. Yeah.
We get used cars and try and keep our expenses low so we can always have a place that we're going. And so those are the types of memories that I would prefer to create versus, amassing so many things in the house that are collecting dust.
That's totally true. Experiences, whatever it is that is important to you, and don't just do it mindlessly.
Yeah.
So you made this into a business, obviously.
Yes.
You mentioned Tailor-Made Budgets is your company. You took the Dave Ramsey coaching program.
I did, yes. So when we got out of debt, I started toying with the idea of helping other people do the same thing and what does that look like? How can I get that done? I didn't actually know that he had a program. I just started looking around in different places and I was considering all these programs. And then as I was doing my research, I realized, oh my gosh, he has a program. And so I actually took my husband too. So I paid for my husband to come with me to the training.
Nice.
Yeah, so he can catch the vision and get clarity about what it is I was trying to do. That was a really good experience. And I did that back in 2006. I actually, in 2005 is when I started letting people know that this is what I wanted to do. I sent a letter out to everybody that I knew and I said, hey, you know what, I'm starting this business. My husband and I got out of debt and I'd love to help people create a budget plan, a debt reduction plan. This is a passion of mine. And I would love it if not for you, if someone else that you know who needs this type of help. And so I got my first few clients from that, and that paid for me to be able to take us both to Nashville and get trained. And I've actually been one of Dave Ramsey's local coaches for the last 14 years since then. Yeah. So it's been, even in transitioning from Phoenix to Indiana, it has been one of the stable parts of the business for sure.
Yeah. So so you're speaking and
Yeah.
you're coaching people, speaking. What are the other things that you're doing as part of your business?
Yeah, so I do workshops. A couple of my workshops are budget. It's not a dirty word. And so I help people create a budget and a spending plan that actually works. And I have another workshop that I do, get out of debt for life. And so obviously it's on the steps to get out of debt and stay out of debt. I also talk with teenagers and do empowerment type of workshops for them
I
and
love
showing
that.
them, yeah, how to not only avoid college debt, but avoid the pitfalls that come when you go to college, and then how to transition into a real career and working life, and how that makes sense. I give them a picture of my life and what it looked
Yeah.
like for me to have the student loan debt. And I'm very honest and transparent about that, why it's important for them to avoid it. And then I balance that out with showing them, if they stay out of debt, what it would look like for them to become millionaires. And they get super excited about it. Starting them out when they're, with that in the back of their mind that it's possible when they're 18, and being able to know that they can actually have a solid financial future is super cool to be a part of. I've written a book, and it is called Naked and Unashamed: 10 Money Conversations Every Couple Must Have. I love working with couples. I enjoy them being able to get on the same page with their money and to have a safe place that they can talk about some difficult issues. So that's one of the projects that I launched that out in 2017, and it is something that I use as a tool not only for my clients. For my clients, I'll get the book, but also when I'm doing speaking events, and being able to have that as a tool for anyone who may not be ready for coaching but needs a resource, or who's looking to be a part of, or have me do a speaking event for a workshop or a company or something like that. So that has been a good resource as well. That was my last baby that I birthed. I'm not having any other children.
And you can do like the coaching and workshops anywhere, right? Or do like the coaching online, I guess. You probably go
Yeah.
somewhere to do the workshops.
Yeah, so I do local workshops where I do those in person as well, but and lunch and learns, things like that. But I do virtual ones as well, where we, have a month-long program that I take people through. So you can be anywhere and get involved in some of those online coaching programs that I do. And of course, if your company is looking for someone to come in and do some financial wellness, that is something that I enjoy, because I love being able to change a workspace, and where people go every day and they trust each other, and then they start to ask each other how they're coming on some of their financial goals. And so I
Oh,
love being
wow.
able to do that, because it takes some of the burden off of their minds while they're at work, and they don't have to worry about their finances. They have some, a new way to feel like they have a game plan, and so they don't have to worry. They can shift that to being a more productive employee at the job. So I love that as well.
And the thing I like about coaching is that it crosses borders, because you're not, the core of this is not buy this stock and put it in a Roth IRA, or
Right, right,
right,
exactly.
which wouldn't
Yeah.
make sense to me because I'm Canadian. But
Yep.
coaching and the budget stuff and the cash flow plan, this is universal.
It is. Yeah, it is. And it's something that everybody needs. It's a skill that you will
Everybody.
use. Yeah, everybody needs it, and everybody will use it for the rest of their life, because even when you're out of debt, you could have no debt, but still need to learn how to manage money, because you still have bills. You still have to put food on the table. You still have to manage a household. Like, these are things that still need to happen. It's a life skill, and getting good at it is vitally important for everybody.
It's kind of like micro debts, right? Like we
Hmm.
have these little debts that even putting something on a credit card for a week is still a debt that we have to pay. And
That's
having
right.
a bill, a phone bill or the heating bill, it's like, we don't pay in advance for these things.
That's right.
Which is interesting, the way that it's all set up, right? It's all set up to have us owing money,
It is.
and having to manage. Like the whole world is set up for cash flow management skills that nobody has.
That's right. That's right.
But
We're
that'll
supposed to.
keep you and me in business.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we're thrown out here into this world to go, we're told to go get a job, go make it happen, go create a business or whatever. And we're never told what to do with the money when it comes in. We're confused and we're like, well, people say this to me all the time. I know I make enough money. I just don't know where it all goes because no one taught them to see where it all goes. I taught this to my daughter when she was in high school, and I said, okay, so how much are you spending, blah, blah, blah. And so, I had set up some things for her, and she hadn't been looking at it. And I said, okay, so let's do this exercise. We added it up, and she had no idea that on snacks at school where she could swipe her card, she was spending $30 a month.
Yeah.
She was like, oh, it's just $1. It's just $1. It's $1. But guess what? It's $1 or $2 every single day you're in school. So it's like $30. And she was very surprised because she didn't see the dollars adding up. And that's what a lot of people aren't taught to do, is to actually see the impact of their spending. When we spend on a debit card, on a credit card, any type of plastic, we don't feel the transaction. It doesn't register that something actually occurred. When we hand a $20 bill over or some cash, we are now like, hold on a second, do I really want this? It gives us pause. It may not stop you, but you recognize that a transaction has occurred. And that's the difference.
I always wonder, do we keep teaching our children to use cash when it seems like it might be, well, in the States it's more prevalent, but like in Australia, for example, nobody uses cash. In Kenya, nobody uses cash because it's all mobile payments, and your cash is going to be stolen, for example.
Yeah.
So,
right.
do we keep, and here, we have cash, but I don't use cash very often. I've had a $20 bill in my pocket for weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
So, but your example is that that's still more powerful, or do we need a different way to teach about plastic, right?
Well, you know what? Because cash is still available and possible here, it makes it an easier conversation. I'll say that people tend to spend less when they use cash. But if you're going to use credit or any type of debit card, you have to pay attention to what you're doing. The only way it makes sense to use any type of plastic is if you're paying attention to what's really going on and you have safeguards up for yourself so that you're not overspending. And people have to be committed to that part of the process if that's the way they want to go. I don't have a problem if they want to use a debit card all the time. It's just, are you looking at it on a weekly basis to see how you're doing or how you're tracking towards your goals and how you're staying within your healthy boundaries? And that's the key. People aren't looking at their money enough to know whether or not they're staying within the healthy boundaries.
I love that. I think there should be, like, you should have to sign an agreement whenever you get a debit or credit card that every time I use this, I'm going to be paying attention to it.
Yeah,
like that should be part of the package, because you're right. Without doing that, it just gets away from you so fast,
easily,
and we don't want that to happen. Well, this has been a great conversation. Getting to know you and your story and what you do now to help people is so great. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And I'll see you in September in DC.
Yay! That'll be awesome.
And that was episode 88 with Ericka Young. If you like the podcast and want to see me get to episode 100 and beyond, please support the podcast by going to my Patreon site and becoming a patron. It's only a few bucks a week, but if enough people do it, it starts to add up. Head over to patreon.com/BoHumphreys if you're interested. I am now offering free 15-minute personal finance consultations online. I'm a personal finance coach, so if you're looking for someone to help you get organized, head over to BoHumphreys.com and click on the banner to book a free 15-minute consultation with me. We'll chat about your situation. You can decide if booking an hourly coaching session is something that might help you get moving in the right direction. That's it for this episode. I'll be back next week with one of my favorite personal finance people and founder of the hugely popular blog Budgets Are Sexy, Jay Money.